So why don't we get started? I am Eric Lindstrom, and this is my colleague Josh Rose, and we are at LudusLabs, and we are game design industry consultants, and today we're here to talk about making the transition from console to mobile and social games. What I want to do first is talk briefly about the two of us, very briefly though. We're longtime console veterans. We've been in the console business for more than 20 years, but we jumped into the social mobile market 4 or 5 years ago and have made many games in many genres since that time and learned quite a lot. And that's what we're here to do, is talk about the things that we learned that frankly should be obvious, but actually turned out not to be obvious at all. So, some assumptions for this talk, not life in general. Technology issues are not why your games fail. If your game doesn't run, if you have bugs, you see that, you fix them, you get it out there. That's not what we're talking about today. Promotion and advertising are not design concerns. Well, yes, they are. But for today, what we're talking about is your game succeeding or failing in the marketplace, all these other things considered equal. And number 3, you already know a lot about making console games, otherwise you wouldn't worry about transitioning from console games to social mobile games. And the goals of this talk are to talk about the issues generally. You can't really talk about how to make a console game in 30 minutes. You can't really talk about how to make a social mobile game in 30 minutes. And talking about making that transition is even more complicated. So what we're going to do is talk about the general landscape of pitfalls and issues and tools to go out and find out how to make that transition yourself. So here are some few obvious facts. Console games are not board games, card games, paper games, lots of other kinds of games. A lot of people spend so much time living the console game life. It's easy to forget that it's a very specialized type of game experience. Console games are also not social and mobile generally. And if you have been living that console life, that's very possibly all you know. For many years, I did live that console life, and finding out that I actually didn't know that much about games. I just knew a hell of a lot about console video games. Was quite a shocker. In fact, a few years back when I made this realization, I sat down to design a card game, just using a deck of cards. Very humbling. I recommend it to all of you. Getting a card game that you invent such that your kids come back and say, "Hey, Dad, can you play that card game?" That was a learning experience that I wish I could repeat. But what I want to get to is this idea of instincts, because people talk about their game instincts, but what they're really talking about is what they learned over years of playing console games and designing console games, and it becomes so ingrained in people, they feel like these are their gut, these are their instincts, and really what it is this accumulated experience. So oftentimes we think of these as instincts because we don't necessarily have reasoning we can articulate or logic about why. Someone says, well, why do you want that weapon that powerful? Or why do you want to wait this long before this appointment expires? And you say, well, it just feels right. Well, nobody was born with these instincts. You accumulated this information over years of playing and analyzing games, and what that amounted to was you building up this ability to very quickly assimilate and to analyze and to spit out what you think the right answer is, and that right answer is going to be for a console game, because that's the world that you live in. And that confusion that I'm harping on is pretty much the crux of why a lot of people have trouble making the transition from console to mobile social, because they find that they grew up in a world that they thought was teaching them how to survive, and it turned out it was teaching them how to survive in a very specialized world. and the world of social mobile is different. And when you go to that world, a lot of what you learned in console gaming is true, because the Venn diagram of all these games overlap a lot. But there are areas where they do not overlap. And the more you're open and flexible to not only what you don't know, but how what you do know is actually not applicable in the environment you're in, the easier it is to make this transition. I think that when I look at all of the people that have successfully made the transition from console to mobile, they fall into two broad categories. One is they have a lot of experience making and playing and analyzing a lot of different types of games. And if all you do is play console, you need to play other games, analyze other games, and make other games. Design your card game to be able to understand that different types of games have different rules. You don't have to go to the extent of my colleague Randy out here, who probably has designed every kind of game on the planet, which is why I teamed up with him. But it's important to understand those rules on an intrinsic level, because you can read Jesse Schell's book, you can read anything you want about these other games and why they work the way they do. It doesn't become your experience or your instinct until you actually play them and try to design them and find out that, oh wait, I thought it would work that way. Turns out it actually doesn't work that way at all. So here are some examples of differences that are a little strange to people that come out of console. In console games, it's really a lot about the fun. And in the free-to-play world and in console, or I'm sorry, social mobile, fun is just one of the pieces. There are a lot of other things going on that console gamers would consider not fun at all. But they're very valid things that you need to consider when making your games. In console games, players want an immersion for the most part. And in mobile games, they want bite-sized interactions. It's a very different experience they're looking for. And when I see these designers who can't get out of the mindset of everything they learned in console, they're often running up against these issues where they're saying, but that's not fun. But that's not what players want to do. But that's not what I want to do. Well, make console games. That's what you want. And this last one, production quality, just like everything else, it does play a role in social mobile. But just like in the earlier days of console, it's not usually the prime mover. People are jumping onto these little games very quickly, and either they're sticking or they're not. It's not about that immersion. It's not about that luxurious world that you're stepping into. It's about spending time in the Starbucks line more productively, more fun than you otherwise would. So the good thing about social mobile is that in console games, you ship the product, you're done. Anything you learn from it, it's too late, and you apply it years later in your next game. But in mobile gaming, you can do it live, iterate in the market, and get it to work that game, not the next game, that game. You can even test and find out. The laboratory is out there. The market is your laboratory, and you can continue to move that game into greater and greater success by learning about how it performs and the market that you're trying to target. But the bad is that there are thousands of these games released every month compared to the GameStop, which you get 10 every month. So discovery is very hard, but that's another topic. So to make that transition, it's really kind of some cliches here, right? Question assumptions. Well, the hardest assumption to question is the one you don't realize you're making, and that's what's making it an assumption. But whenever you're in this world and you think, I don't understand why games do this. I don't understand why players do this. Well, if you don't understand, that means you're making an assumption. And you need to go out and find the data that tells you what the right answer for that market is. And don't continue to misapply console thinking. And really believe in the data. That was the biggest lesson that I learned early on, which is players vote with their pocketbooks. And you can say all you want that players don't want to do X, players don't think Y is fun, and you're wrong if the data says that you're wrong. Follow the data and the games will take care of themselves. And over time, you will develop new instincts because you're understanding what this new world and this new market wants and how to address it and interacting with it dynamically. And you're testing and iterating and changing these products on the fly. And you'll eventually be able to have a larger view of what that game world is than just console. But how do you develop those new instincts? Well, that's for Josh Rose to explain. I took the easy part.
Thanks, Eric. I went through, wow, you were talking very quietly. I went through the same transition as Eric, making, the nice thing about mobile is in roughly 2 years, I got to work on 14 products. That was an amazing crash course in mobile social. And I learned that, boy, a lot of stuff that I just took for granted really didn't apply. So, how did I go about re-educating myself? So first, like Eric said, watch the charts. Apple has this great feature. You can hit a button and see the top grossing games, right? Every day I went and looked at that list. And not just looking at what is selling, but what are they selling within that game? Are they selling level packs? Are they selling power-ups? What are they selling? Why are they making money? And just watching it, and if you go look at it every day, you start seeing some real good trends. But the second thing is to feel it. There's a metric for developing mastery that you need to do 10,000 hours in a field. Probably if you were a console game designer, you played 10,000 hours of console games and PC games and arcade games. How many of you have played 10,000 hours of social games? That would be 2 hours a day, 7 days a week for roughly 2.7 years. So I don't think, I might be getting close after 5 years of playing social games, but I don't think I'm there yet. And what you find when you start actually, and who in this room has played a decoration game past level 30? Couple? Yeah. So here's what you find when you do that. Your relationship to the game changes, right? You think of a game as something, just like when you play Quake, you get one experience, and when you play World of Warcraft, you get another. Well, when you're playing Farmville, it's a totally different experience. You don't want something that is going to grab you and hold you the same way Quake would, because you're playing it every single day, and you're playing it when you get to your desk, and you're saying, oh, I got to do this email, but you know what? I'll just log in and play Farmville for 5 minutes. And the fact that it's not engaging, that if someone walks into my room, my cubicle, while I'm at work and I'm sitting there playing Farmville and I can just totally ignore it and turn to them and talk to them, that's a good thing, right? So until you actually play one of these games through the grind and see what effect it has on your life to play that game, you need to experience that. It's really important. And you start actually getting to realize something that my friend Matt Mulhaley told me about a decade ago, which was grind is good. And a decade ago, I thought that was a completely ridiculous statement, and I've come to embrace it now. So you can start developing some games, but another thing I heard about a decade ago is good design begins with market insight. And in the old days, the market insight was, what do I want to play? But now we have to get to be better designers. So what kind of market insight is useful? Well, there's two categories in general. There's market data, and there's market observations. And everyone's talking about analytics and data, and it's really useful. You want to use it all the way through the process. So it's before you start, right? While you're designing, you want to be using data, and then after launch. And this is another big shift that you want to be thinking of, is that your game does not end when you ship it. Everyone has said that, but you're really running an entertainment service. And the data becomes your information about what the people who are using your service are doing, and you want to be able to react to that. I'm going to start moving a little faster so we get a little time at the end for questions, by the way. So before we talked about this a little bit, look at what's selling, look at what's at the top of the charts. Financial success is not the only metric for creative success, right? We are designers, but we are also here to design a product, and if we don't make money, we don't get to do it again. So it's really helpful to look at who's making money, and it's surprising sometimes. You go, why in the world is that game making money? I guess I better go play it and understand it. The word everything, track everything, what does that actually mean? Well, I like to start with all of the activity around the game, right? Sometimes it's very difficult to track everything that happens within a game, but you want to see how many people are coming to the front page, how many of them are hitting start play, right? All of those numbers tell you what your user experience is. So you want to be tracking that. These are actual numbers from a friend of mine who asked me to look at his game, and unfortunately I haven't been able to help him because, boy, I'd love to. He launched an iPhone game. He got 70,000 downloads in 3 weeks. Wow, that's great. And he sold $500 worth of sales. And I said to him, well, what's happening? And the answer was he didn't have analytics. So all I could do was play it and give him my educated opinion on what was happening in between those downloads and those sales and where he was losing his users. We shouldn't have to guess about that anymore. Google Analytics is free. There's a lot of other options. Don't guess. You really need to have it. And then this was the other shocker. After you launch, you keep going, right? So those analytics are useful, but it's not enough, especially from a console, you get into crunch and you ship the game and you kind of throw your hands in the air and you say, woohoo, we made it. Well, you're really just getting started. So I'm going to use an example from a game I made a couple years ago. I was working with Flying Wisdom. I co-founded Flying Wisdom Studios, and me and my co-founders were working with NG Moko on a thing called Star Wars Imperial Academy. And Star Wars is a big license. So again, from my console perspective, the idea of doing a soft launch of a Star Wars title, right? This is a big title. You're going to put it out there. People are going to notice. You're going to lose your press. No, we didn't worry about any of that. We went ahead and put it out. We launched it in Canada with no press at all. And we spent a month watching the users and every day pushing new data. It was a powerful experience to be part of that. And in that month, we tried selling some characters, we tried selling some weapons, and what we eventually found was these robots that you could open with these special keys you had to buy seemed to be the thing that people wanted. And we ended up with hallways that had rows of robots going down the hallways. Never would have gotten there any other way other than just that whole month of trying. And when we went to do our launch, that month didn't hurt our launch at all. We had all the press we wanted, we still got featured by Apple. All the stuff that we were worried about, stealing the thunder of our launch, didn't matter. We had a whole month to play with a live audience and figure out what would work. It's really powerful. So, however, one of the other things we learned in that process is all that data is not actually information. So I think people have commented on this, that you can't A to B test your way to greatness. No, you can't. But you can probably A/B test your way to profitability. And that means you get to keep making games. So, all right, so we can use data, and then we can start using market observations. One of my early market observations about mobile is location matters. So a couple of different ways in which location matters. The first is, well, people seem to be interested in location mechanics. I've seen a handful of products and games come out with location mechanics, and they seem to get a lot of notice. So it seems like the audience is kind of hungry for it. I haven't seen anybody where they've done anything that I think is really, groundbreaking with location, which tells me that maybe there's something still there to be unlocked. Or maybe it's just the press is interested in it, so these products then get more press. Who knows? But for some reason, location seems to be something that people are really interested in. But beyond that, location matters because where people play your games changes how they relate to them. I'm a hardcore gamer. But when I'm standing in line at Starbucks, I do not want a hardcore experience. When I am sitting down at my desk to take a coffee break, to check into Facebook and see if someone sent me any messages, I do not want a hardcore experience at that point, right? In fact, I don't want to be sitting, playing with a TV on a street corner, right? There are things that I can get away with in my living room that I just can't get away with out in the world of mobile. So one of our early experiences with that was an unnamed, unpublished augmented reality game. And we thought, wow, this is cool stuff, right? We're going to make a game where you play like this. right? You look around, it's like I'm looking through a window, somebody's laughing, right? And I can blow things up, right? You know, Wii is fun, right? I do this in my living room, and Kinect is fun, right? So augmented reality, this should be fun. Well, guess what? Standing on a street corner doing this, I look kind of silly, right? So I'm totally happy to look silly in my living room, but I don't want to look silly on a street corner. So you got to think about where people are doing this. We did another early product. It was with the Lady Gaga license, and the idea was to do a karaoke replacement using the iPhone. We were really excited about this. We thought, I've got a microphone, I've got a screen, I've got everything I need right here, right? And karaoke is a huge market. One of the things we did at the time we were making this product was we worked really hard to get a television out into the product. So you could take your phone, plug it into the TV, use this like a mic, and sing the song that's on the TV. So it really did become a karaoke replacement, right? In retrospect, I think that was entirely the wrong feature for us to, very difficult for us to do. We had to do some double rendering and things on the screen, but anyhow, it was the wrong feature for us to push for. If you start realizing that these are mobile devices, they go with you, right? So the location is everywhere. Well, then a feature that allows me to do something with my television isn't very interesting. Perhaps a better feature is, let me sing the song and post it to YouTube so my friends can hear me sing it. Let me sing the song and send it to somebody and ask them to sing it with me as a duet, right? So the location is everywhere. I don't want to look silly, you know, standing there doing something silly, but also, you know, I don't want to have the requirement of connecting to a TV to connect to my friends, right? Make that social experience mobile. So, hey, we've got time left for questions. We did well. So in conclusion, you have to retrain your instincts. That's going to take a long time, but you're not going to get there without digging in. If you think that you're going to make a game that uses grind as a core loop and you haven't embraced what that means, if you haven't experienced it, you probably need to go experience it. You know, try playing lots of mobile games, play whatever's on the top charts, figure out what it's like to play a game in Starbucks. One of the things that I notice a lot is how many mobile games take a long time for me to get into them. You know, if I've got to fire up your game and hit 2 or 3 buttons to get into the game, I'm probably already at the front of the line by the time I get there. I don't even get to play it, right? And then start looking at the market and looking for what the patterns are, what are the insights that you can use to inform your product development. And here's the first one: in mobile, location matters. And the location is going to be everywhere. Great. Did we get a mic? We have a mic. So we wanted to have time to, 30 minutes is pretty quick, so we wanted to open this up and let people ask questions. So is anyone? Oh, one more slide. Sorry. By the way, we are actually consultants, which is the important slide. Hey, Noah.
Hi, I thought I'd start things off. So I was working with a company. We had some software that had some interesting location-based stuff that we were doing. And so about 2 years ago, I thought, maybe it would be cool to do a location-based game. And I've got 2 folders I just checked on my iPhone of stuff that I downloaded 2 years ago that used location. It really shocked me because I'd never heard of most of these games, but things like Turf Wars and Merchant and lots of things where you stake out a part of the virtual world that corresponds to your actual physical location. And to my knowledge, none of them have taken off, or at least if they have, it hasn't made big bucks, And so I'm just wondering, I have that same instinct. It seems like location should matter, but certainly the kind of obvious stuff hasn't worked of saying, oh yeah, you can have the virtual world correspond to the real world. And I was wondering if you had any further insights about where to push that location, or what do you think, have people responded to something in analytics that you found?
So here's what I think is happening. If you look at the MMOs that came out before World of Warcraft, they're all kind of digging in the same space, right? And they're all kind of encountering the same problems, right? And then, but there was still something interesting there that a lot of people wanted, right? And then World of Warcraft kind of solved all the problems, really, right? So I look at it the same way. There are some problems that I see with location-based gaming. For example, in Parallel Kingdoms, the map, which achieved some success, I think they hit 2 million users at one point. And it's a very hardcore MMO experience. But when you log in, I couldn't find any space to make a base anywhere near my house. I literally said, show me the nearest space, and it put me in Ohio, right? So this idea that the location is going to be my house and all of the good feelings and identification I would have gotten from that was suddenly lost, right? So, how do we solve that? Well, in MMOs, we have zones. We have a newbie zone, right? So I think that one solution that I haven't seen tried yet would be multiple layers of map, right? And then have a map that's just there for the entry level. So what I believe is there's interest there, but there's all of these problems with doing location-based gaming. And it takes real effort to solve these problems. And just like World of Warcraft finally got it right, I think that someone out there is going to finally get it right. And it's a matter of solving all the problems that come up with location.
Hi, I have two questions. First off, you'd said that transitioning to the social audience is different and hard. But my question is it that console gamers tend to want to build things that they like? And my first thing is, because I hear this around the office a bit, is I don't want to do that. I want to build a game that's like, my experience and get people involved in that. And I've even heard with a couple of other indie developers that they're kind of thinking along those lines as well, that they don't want the grind, they want to pull that away. And I'm thinking like Tiny Tower right now, there is a grind, but there's no pinch where you have to end up paying. Is it a sense of, could you build a more console-esque experience and then bring people to it because there isn't one in social right now? Is there an audience for that?
That's Kabam, right?
Yeah,
So, you can do anything, and you can be successful at anything. A lot of what we're talking about is the odds, the statistics, and the
Right.
patterns, and whatnot. So, if you look at the charts, and you look at the top 50, which is where all the money is being made, they are predominantly certain types of experiences. Does that mean that something else can't come along and break through all that? No, that's what innovation is. But there's a difference between innovating in a way that the audience is interested in versus you trying to bring a console experience to a non-console environment. And that is a much more difficult thing to do.
Right.
But it's possible.
My one other question is, you said you had done a soft launch with the Star Wars product. I wasn't sure how you get users if you do a soft launch.
So same way you do in a normal launch, you buy them. You just buy them in much smaller quantities. So we were doing 500 to 1,000 users every morning, watching them over the course of the day, taking the statistics, having a meeting, usually pushing a new build that night, buying new users the next morning. So there's also, look at Infinity Blade and, what was the big racing one that just came out? Yeah, CSR. I mean, there's clearly, especially on the pads, there's clearly an audience for, this higher end, more console-like product. And that's what I like, so please make some more.
It's 11 now, so perhaps if you guys can, if anyone has more questions, maybe we can talk afterwards. Is Frederick in the room, the next speaker? All right, okay.